Hello, Michael Warren Thomas visiting RaindanceHarvest Farm, which is not a retail location, but you can meet Brian Bay at many of the farmers markets in the city, Brighton, South Wedge farmers markets, and he brings plants in the spring. He brings tomatoes to sell in the summer, and we'll see some of the areas he grows tomatoes in. Not necessarily all out in the field, but also in the greenhouse, and tons of varieties of tomatoes. That's the key. All different sizes, colors, flavors, shapes. It makes it a lot of fun, and a colorful plate for dinner.
The sustainability goal of the farm is building the ecology within the soil, and building a cycle, and a positive feedback cycle that you're promoting microorganisms and promoting the life within the soil that will in turn feed your plants, fertilize your plants. 30 yards of Huga compost trucked in here every 2 weeks. And it's, you know, we're talking over $1,000 a load, so we're putting a major investment in the material, but it really does pay off in the fertility and the crop yield. Some of our products are a little bit more costly, but really it's a reflection in what is going into this, our long-term sustainability goals. And eventually, when we get this up to snuff, I don't intend on relying on external fertility being brought in. I would like to have my own fertility. Build it, everything. You know, we're not using a heater, of course, in the summer. We use that for winter production. We do some greens in here, but $10,000, and I think that's a realistic investment on something this size, and to be able to use it consistently. And then we have little hoop houses that we're using, and then we do our starters in like the 17-footers, and those are really minimal investments. These weeds wouldn't be green if this would be waterlogged, heavy clay soil. And there was an attempt to put a nice pasture mix, and there's some clover coming up underneath here. It just needed to be shaded. And this is good. These beds, all the way down, they're running this way. The water could drain down the gutters. Catch and go out. These are for fall. They're going to be fall crops. So these are sitting here. Ideally, my production system, the intention was to have white clover in the gullies and in the but you know, everything isn't always perfect, and weeds or the indigenous the indigenous blend is what we're doing, and we're weed whacking in the gullies. About this size or bigger is when we like to harvest them all summer long. We don't want them to get bitter, because a big head of lettuce is in the middle of the summer. It's bitter. And so our intention, we're really trying to get, and then also varieties that are these are all Johnny's varieties, like
Johnny's seeds?
Yeah, there's Coastal Star, Jericho, Barbados. These are varieties that were bred for higher temperatures, and the flavor is much better on them. Now you see the weeds coming up down through here. If I had to do any weeding on this farm, I would be in the holes. We don't do, very little weeding. And this stuff is harvested before the weeds really become an issue, and the ground is worked up. I'm not very good at growing spring spinach. I'm much better growing fall spinach crop. So it's just another thing you'll learn. We might cut that crop out of our spring, together. The outdoor tomatoes will be in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beds. We used to do probably several acres of outdoor tomato production. It was just, and we had tons of tomatoes, but we also lost a lot too. And just the labor that would go into that didn't make sense. So we're cutting everything back and trying to do what makes sense.
If you ever feel lonesome down in San Antonio, beg, steal, or borrow 2 nickels or a dime to call me on the phone.
And these are all bush beans. It really, the agronomics of this requires quite a bit of acreage to make this a profitable crop. if you're doing like a vertical farming, you'd probably use a pole bean variety. You're not using bush beans, but if you're like, see the small farms at the market, the bean price for those are outrageous. So for us, we have to keep our price somewhat competitive, even though we're still organic, chemical free. We're still asking like $3.50 a quart, depends. And then when you break it down, the amount of labor you put into it and the time it took to pick it, there's really a small profit margin on all of this.
You're growing the beans for Good Food Collective?
Good Food Collective. And
what's that?
So yes, it is a joint venture or a multi-farm CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, where people buy shares, pre-buy shares, and then they get a box of food delivered to them once a week for so many weeks. It comes out to be like $25 a week, and they get whatever's in season. But it's like making an investment into the local agriculture.
This is unusual in that it's multi-farms coming together to do it.
Yeah, it's very secure. It's more of a secure CSA because of that, where if our farm fails or doesn't do well, another farm will pick up the slack.
Yeah.
And so it's nice. And it also allows for specialization, which I'm a big advocate for, which is rare in the organic world. They're always talking about diversification and extremely diversified farms. But I believe you could be diversified yet still specialized. So like if I'm doing tomatoes, I'm not just going to do 2 types of tomato varieties. I'll have 30 types of varieties. So even though I am only growing tomatoes, I'll be diversified within that crop. But our crops, so we have tomatoes, lettuce, beans, carrots, and summer squash, and that's it. So then other farmers will pick up the other crops, or some of us overlap. But on a traditional CSA, the farm will be providing everything. So they're going to be growing the onions, they're going to be growing the garlic, they're going to be growing the winter squash, they're going to be growing the beets, they're going to be growing all of my crops. And that's just incredible. It doesn't make economic sense, or it doesn't make sense of time. You kind of find what crops you're good at growing, and the farmers should stick with those crops and all work together to market the products together. So,
what variety is it?
This side, there's some early glow. There's dark. It's very diversified. And also, when I sent the guys down here to plant them last year, they kind of mixed up some of the varieties. So it was a little bit mixed up, which made it really difficult for picking this year.
Right.
They're going to go bad fast. Which, now if I was conventional, I could, and the debate's still out in my head. What is acceptable in production? What isn't? What is realistic in production? This year we're doing completely chemical-free. Is completely chemical-free realistic production for this type of crop in the Northeast? And these are all issues we have to address as a community. And, it's easy for someone to sit in their desk in downtown Rochester and preach about chemical-free crops. But when they get down to the actual production of the food, it becomes far more complicated of an issue. And then also, what is acceptable in the marketplace? What are we going to accept? Do we accept blemishes on our apples? Do we accept holes, And a farmer's livelihood, he has to worry about feeding his family, and so he has to market what will sell. We have wild fruit randomly along in the hedgerows.
And your apples, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll bring some to market. And over by my house, I have an old apple orchard it's out of production. It's not sprayed at all. And some like Small World Bakery came and they picked all the apples and they chopped them up, cut out the wormholes and used them for apple pies. Groups of people like that, it works for. And I think it works for processing. I mean, for jams and juices and stuff where it's not. But fresh fruit is where it becomes an issue. It is an attempt to get some early tomatoes going and another environmentally controlled area, limiting the moisture that gets on the leaves. And these are grown in a mixture of compost, that puka compost, and peat, at about a 70 to 30 ratio. And I did that ratio because I was a little bit worried about the pH. The peat might lower the pH. And also, we did a couple of pure compost, and they seem to be growing fine. So maybe I don't even need to be adding peat at all to this mix. But then we will be setting up, maybe this upcoming week, we'll set up an irrigation drip system on these, and then I'll be doing like an organic drip feed, a sea kelp, or a fish fertilizer, hydrolyzed fish. I think there's a product called Neptune's Harvest that we used before. Also, we can top dress these with bone meal to add the calcium. What you will see sometimes in this type of production is you'll see a lot of blossom end rot. So we really need to make sure that plants are getting enough calcium in this pot production. But so far, so good. This is our first year doing this type, because we have so much soil and land. We always did it right out in the land. But we wanted to give this a trial.
How many varieties do you have in here?
Limited. We have Cherokee Purple, we have Copia, Prudence Purple, Green Zebra, Red Zebra, Valencia. What else do we have? Brand new one. Then we threw in a couple of hothouse types, poly types, which are bred for poly production. Arbison, Lola, Trust. And some of these you could see the poly ones. They're setting fruit, and the fruit's quite nice. But the flavor, they're nice, they're good, they're alright, but they're not as good flavor-wise as the heirlooms.
Which markets will you have the tomatoes at this summer?
It all depends. If we get these up and cranking, and we get that house cranking, and they get the other house, and the outdoor ones come in, my dream would be, Brighton, Fairport, South Wedge, fill my CSA, and anything extra will be at the public market. What's really sad is I used to have a great public market business, and my tomato production kind of declined. We got out of the public market selling our actual fruit, and I think I still have people coming back to me saying, when are you coming back to the public market? When are you coming back? And I know there's a market there that I'm kind of left untouched as of recent. But all these markets, you get pulled in this direction, that direction, and then you start doing a whole bunch, and then you don't do anything good when you get too overwhelmed,
That's a lot of markets to do.
Yeah. It's constantly reevaluating what I should be doing and where I should be marketing. Maybe we might limit it down to eventually doing just a CSA and one market. Because my wife really would like to be able to go on vacation. We leave excess strings so that as this grows, if I need to climb up here, untie it, and lower it down, I can do that.
Michael Warren Thomas, and we've been visiting with Brian Bay of RaindanceHarvest, which is up in Webster, but again, not a retail location. You look for Brian at the markets. What's your website?
It's RaindanceHarvest.com, and you can find us at the Brighton Market, at the Fairport Market, at the South Wedge Market, and at the Rochester Public Market, on and on. We also are the member of the Good Food Collective, which is a multi-farm CSA. And you can check that out at thegoodfoodcollective.com.